Hello everyone, this is Britsimon. I wanted to bring you some news, pretty important and exciting news about DV 2020. The visa bulletin for August 2019 was published a couple of hours ago. And although it is primarily about DV 2019 and it has the cutoff numbers listed as all current for DV 2019, it has important information about the DV 2020 results. So let's just go through that. This is an important piece of information that will be interesting to anybody in DV 2020 because they will want to know where their number lies within the selected numbers. Just as a quick note, we have noticed that the numbers for DV 2020 are quite unlike previous years. They're much higher than previous years. And so the question on people's minds has been, is the selectee count going to be much higher than previous years? Quick answer, no, it isn't. We have that news now, we have the information. And although I've only had this a couple of hours, I'm already pretty excited about DV 2020. I'm much less pessimistic than I was up until this morning about DV 2020, and I can explain why. Okay, so looking at the announcement about DV 2020, let's just look at a few things here. Important points. Approximately 83,884 applicants have been registered and notified, i.e. that means 83,884 selectees. Okay, now when we talk about selectees, we're talking about the selected applicant themselves, the principal selectee, as we call them, and their family members. Okay, so a man who is a winner, who is married and has 2 children, would represent 4 of this 83,000 numbers here. Okay, all of those 4 people would be registered on one selectee number case. So case number AF 2020 1234 would have that winner and his family, right? So that's all of those people will be on there. So the selectee numbers are important, but as well as the case numbers. Other interesting stuff about DV 2020. There were nearly 15 million qualified entries, 23 million. That's roughly similar to previous years. That's not particularly high. One of my theories when I saw the very high selectee numbers well, there was a couple of theories. One of the things that I was concerned about was instantly a very high selectee number, right? So in previous years where we've seen over 100,000 selectees tend to result in cutoffs at the end of the year, whereas years where we see under 100,000 selectees, 90,000 or 80,000, 85,000, that sort of range, we tend to not see too many cutoffs at the end of the year, perhaps for 1 or 2 regions, but not globally for everybody. In DV 2019, partly because of the new document procedure, all regions have been current now for a couple of months. There are no cutoffs for the regions or for any countries, which means that there are enough visas for everybody, right? So the question is that same thing going to happen in DV 2020? And up to now, because of the very high numbers we've been seeing in reported from people all around the world, I've been pessimistic about that and thinking, okay, it must be an over-selected year. I did have another theory, but that was my first thought. Now we're seeing that they've only selected 83,000 selectees. That's really great news, absolutely amazing news. So it's not what I would consider to be an over-selected year. Okay. Now let's look at the data that we've got here as well. You'll notice in the visa bulletin we actually have a number of selectees per country, which is interesting. Now bear in mind these are directly related to the number of people that enter the lottery from any given country. So DV Lottery statistics, you can always do this yourself and have a look at to see the statistics on entries, previous year's entries, etc. If we look at, for example, the last 3 years, and we look at how many people have entered from each place. So from Azerbaijan, for example, they had 30,000 entries in DV 2016. 23,000 people were derivatives on those 30,000 entries. So there, from Azerbaijan, just as an example, there was 54,000 people in the lottery for 2016. That number went up to 72,000 in 2017 and 124,000 in 2018. Okay, you'll see some countries have incredible number of entries. If we look at Ghana, for instance, Ghana has 1.9 million entries in 2016 with a low number of derivatives. I can talk to that a little bit more. So in 2016 had 2.2 million people in the lottery, about the same in 2017 and about the same in 2018. Ghana is not a particularly large country. I think it's about 20 million people. So if you can imagine, 1 in every 10 people is somehow in the lottery every year. That is clearly, without a doubt, the result of agents, fraud, proactive entering, that sort of thing. That's completely bananas. To contrast with, for example, Germany directly above it. Germany is a country of what, about 80 million people, I would guess. So 4 times larger than Ghana, but you can see the difference in entries here. So it is just not credible that Ghana has that many entries without some agent involvement. And for that specific reason, we see very high refusal rates in Ghana, but also we see very high disqualification rates, even prior to the announcement being made. That's the point I wanted to make. I'll come back to it in a few moments, and we'll talk more about Ghana because it's kind of interesting with the numbers that we've just seen released. Okay, so what have I done this morning? What I've done is I've taken the selectee numbers that I've seen, and I've been plotting them into a couple of spreadsheets here. So let's see, 2NLs, where are we at? I beg your pardon, let me just get to the right place here. That one, no. Okay, so I've had a number of spreadsheets open this morning. Okay, so the first thing I did was I took the announced numbers and plotted them into a spreadsheet here so that I could get the counts per region. Okay, I've done that for Africa, Asia, EU, Oceania, and South America. And I've taken the totals there and put them by region into a column there. And I've transposed those numbers into this spreadsheet. So I hope you're sort of playing along a little bit here. So these selectee counts are the numbers that have been published this morning in the Visa Bulletin for a total of 83,884, right? Now, that's interesting. Let me just check that. That should be 20 out because we've not got North America. I've literally been doing this in the last hour or so, guys, so please bear with me, a little bit of sort of checking as I go here. I would like to sort of make sure we've got the right data here. Okay, Visa Bulletin 83,884. Why am I seeing the same numbers there? I've got North America in here somewhere. So I've got a slight miscount in here because I should not have exactly the same total. North America has 20 selectees, so I've got a slight number. I'll have to check where I've put the North American selectees. They're in there somewhere. And if I go back here, I can probably find out where they're at. Where's Africa? Asia, that's just Asia. Put in there. Oceania. No. 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 I'm not quite sure where I've put the numbers there. Let me just total this up and again make sure I'm right on that. Any day 4, yeah, okay. So, all right, so slight inaccuracy there. I'll figure it out later, but it's not really relevant. It's not going to change the overall numbers here. Okay, so back to my spreadsheet for the analysis. So I've plotted the selectees on there, and I've also got a derivative rate, which is a slight guess. I don't know the exact derivative rate this year. It's something we only get to know once we see the SEAC data. But I've taken these numbers based on a sort of a reasonable estimate based on previous years, etc. The derivative rate is the average number of selectee plus derivative numbers per case. So in other words, in Africa region, for every case number, there are an average of 1.8 people, meaning that there may be a person with a spouse only, that would be 2, and the next case might be, just one person, no spouse, no children. The case after that might be a family of 4, right? So you take all of those cases, average them, and the average number you can take by region. It's more accurate actually to take it by country because cultural differences within the countries will affect how many people are represented as spouses. Number of children will vary by country, etc. It is by country, and so taking a per region number is slightly inaccurate, but it's a reasonable guesstimate. So from that, I've taken a derivative rate and I've come up with an estimation. This is an estimation only of how many cases there would be in each of those regions, right? And of these regions, the two most useful regions to sort of determine what's going on with this selectee count versus the high number range are Oceania and South America. There's a good reason for that. Let me just switch over to the data that we've seen in previous years. And if those of you that have read my article about Hole's theory, what I call Hole's theory, and the lottery draw process, which I'll create a video about shortly, but for those of you that have read that, you will understand how the data shows us that there is actually a difference throughout the number ranges in how many selectees there are, how many holes there are, etc. And of those in that data, the most sort of consistent countries, or the most consistent regions, I should say, is OC and South America. Right, so we can see that for Oceania, there is a consistent number, roughly speaking, within the whole range of holes. And in a typical year, you could take this to be something about 7%, 6 or 7% for Oceania. And so if there are, let's say, if there were 1,000 case numbers, there would be 930 cases. That's what that means. 930 cases. Each case would then have the selectee and the derivatives. And so let's look at our numbers again here. And in Oceania, I would expect to see 1.65 people on each case. So if we had 1,000 case numbers with a 7% disqualification rate or hole rate, we would see 930 cases, right? And this is just estimation. This is just me explaining the process. And then that would equate to 1,534 people. Okay, so I'm taking the derivative multiplied by my theoretical number in my theoretical 1,000 case numbers, right? Now, why am I talking about all that? Okay, so we've seen highest case numbers reported for the Oceania region of 3,000 something, right? So let's take that as 3,000, and we know that there are 835 cases approximately because we have 1,378 selectees in the Oceania region. Okay, I'm back. I think what we need to show is the overall density rate. That's probably going to explain it to you better than anything else. So again, we'll take Oceania, and if we use a formula here that says 835 cases split into the number of 100 buckets, so in other words 30 for my 3000. Let's say that 3000 highest case number is accurate. It might be a little inaccurate, but close enough for this purpose. So that means we've got 27% density, or put another way, 72% holes rate. Okay, that is massive. That's a dramatic change from what we've seen in previous years. If we do the same thing again, we'll do that for South America. And the reason I'm doing it on these particular countries is because these countries do not have limited countries at all. These regions, rather, do not have limited countries. Could that be right? That sounds ridiculous. 1904 cases. No, that can't be right. 1904. 1904. Oops. In here. 1904 divided by 13.9, not 390. Yeah, that sounds better. 48. So that means an overall holes rate in South America of 51%. So this really is a tremendous shift from where we've been in previous years. This must mean they've implemented some new type of security screening that is performed prior to the release of the selectees. And that's the point here. That's the point I wanted to get across to people in this video. This has not happened before. It's new. We don't know why this is. Okay, I'm now seeing this information for the last hour and a half or so. I haven't had time to consider this. I had speculated this might have been the reason. 2 or 3 months ago, I've speculated over the last 2 or 3 months, people that have paid attention to what I've been saying have seen that I've been saying that there are only one of two explanations why we're seeing such massive high selectee numbers, or sorry, case numbers reported by people. One would be an over-selected year, okay, and we know now that is not the case. And the second explanation could be a new method for excluding people from the selected numbers, the selectee numbers, after the initial selection but before the announcement. It's a disqualification based on some new technology, I would say. Now, it could be, and they have warned in the last couple of years, they have warned about people using photos from previous years. Could be that if people had entered with previously used photos from a previous year's lottery, that could have resulted in disqualifications. And they might have just decided to disqualify people before they even announced the results. It could be that they've got enhanced techniques now for disqualifying cases that are entered by agents, or something similar to that, to pick up people who are doing multiple entries and disqualifying for that reason. We don't know the reason, but I'm absolutely certain now that they have applied some new sort of methodology to cause a lot more disqualifications than we normally see, a lot more holes than we normally see. Okay, so I'll do the same. It's not quite the same for these other regions. So as I've got here, is there an expectation of a constant holes rate? There is in Oceania and South America, but there is not an expectation of that in other regions. So for example, here you can see a somewhat consistent holes rate. The blue color here is a holes rate. And this is 2019 data in Oceania. If we look at South America, again, there's a sort of a somewhat constant, it's not exactly constant, but somewhat constant blue rate there, which is the holes rate. If we look at Africa, we can see that the Holes rate starts constant but goes wider, becomes more holes later on in the process in the number range. And the reason for that is limited countries. Again, I've explained this in detail in a particular blog post, which is my holes theory post. And so if you don't understand that, that's okay. I'll explain it in more detail in a later video, or you can read that post that I made some years ago, and it explains it very well. But you can see this is the same for Asia and EU. Same thing. There is a reduction in cases. There's an increase in holes. I describe this as an increase in holes or a decrease in density. Okay, and if we look at DV 2018, you see exactly the same phenomenon. So in Africa, you can see a reduction in numbers here. For Asia, same thing. We go off a cliff basically. So there's a very small amount of cases being disqualified, first of all, in 2018 in Asia, and then all of a sudden there's massive holes. The cutoff here is due to Nepal and Iran being maxed out on their numbers. Again, I've explained this in detail in other posts. But that's essentially sort of the clearest possible explanation of what goes on there. And again, if we look at Oceania, we can see that there is a consistent number range and hole range throughout the whole number range there. Same thing for SA. This has been happening for several years. I understand it very well. I may not be explaining it very well, but it's well understood. Okay, so where should we get to now? So back to my spreadsheet here explaining what's going on. I'll quickly do these numbers for you. So if we divide that by 750, it's going to be our overall density rate. This number will be selectees, I beg your pardon. Yeah, that one divided by 300. Oops. And this one will be, this is EU, going to be divided by 57. I think 57 may have been exceeded now, 57x. But anyway, we can see there's a massive number of holes. This is across the whole range. So that's going to start off higher than that. Our density number is going to start off higher than these three numbers, and it's going to reduce to be lower than these three numbers, but this is the average throughout the range. And then these two numbers are going to be consistent, somewhat consistent throughout the whole range. So if your case number is, let's say, SA, South America, case number 2000, and there's a 50% holes density, rate in front of you, that means there's only 1,000 cases in front of case number 2000, right? There's 1,000 holes in front of case number 2000 for SA region. In Oceania, the number is almost 75% there. So if you were case number, let's say your case number 2000 in Oceania, you could expect to have only what, 600, 700 cases in front of you. So something in that range, region. So even if your case number is case number 2000, you can expect to be confident of an interview in Oceania this year. So I've got a little bit more data here to show you. Case numbers, highest numbers, and the end number shown in DV 2018. I think what I should do is explain this in a little bit more detail in a second video. I just wanted to get the initial point across here so that people can see that. And what I'll do is I'll collect my thoughts a little bit more, do a little bit more analysis, explain this a little bit more, because what we're saying now, what we're seeing now is this is not an over-selected year, it's an under-selected year. It's very good news for DV 2020 applicants. We now need to start thinking about, will any individual region hit a limit and be maxed out, or is this going to be current for all regions? I don't know that yet. I need to do a little bit of work. I think it's fairly obvious to me that couple of the regions, Oceania, for example, I believe will go current. But I need to go into the numbers a little bit more and explain why I'm thinking that. And that probably is a second video. All right, I hope this was interesting to you. I'm going to try and get this video out straight away so that people are understanding the information. I'll post a quick article as well. And I'm actually planning to be out all day today, so I'm not going to get to do the second video until probably later on tonight or tomorrow morning. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm sorry it's been a bit rambling. I'm sure you understand this is very recent news, and I wanted to get the news out to people as quickly as possible. All right, thank you for your attention. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.